the most painful. They broke up nearly 20 years ago, but their records continue to sell, more than 1 billion, that's billion, so far. They never reunited, rarely talked about what it was like, but this week, 7 years after John Lennon's death, George Harrison remembers.
Are you ready? Let me say it first. You repeat it after me. John. Paul. George. Ringo. I give you the one and only fabulous Beatles.
It just annoyed me that people got so into the Beatles, 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 Beatles. It's not that I don't like talking about them. I'd never stop talking about them. It's Beatles, there's Beatles, that Beatles, 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 Beatles. In the end, it's like, oh, sod off with the Beatles, you know. I mean, screaming crowds everywhere you go, pressmen at your door for years on end, the front cover of every newspaper every day of the week for years. Prying, you know, everywhere you go, trying to find out any little bit of dirt that they can write about you.
You said at one stage that the Beatles were a curse as far as you were concerned. What you're saying is the same thing right now.
It's a lot to deal with. And that's the thing, the Beatles sort of did haunt a lot of us for years, and still do.
Hang on, George, just look to me for a second. That's great.
George Harrison has always struggled with his fame.
Yeah, hair looks great.
Although he says he loathes being in the public eye, he has emerged from a self-imposed exile to promote his first album in 5 years.
Don't do that to me, no chewing.
Since the bitter breakup of the Beatles 18 years ago, this deeply private man has been divorced, remarried, and some say hiding behind the secure walls of his country estate outside London.
Great, George.
While managing on his own to record 8 gold albums in the 70s and launch a respected film company, Harrison has avoided any discussion of the Fab Four until now. He admits he's finally recovered from the ordeal of being George Harrison, the Beatle.
I had no ambition when I was a kid, other than to play a guitar and get in a rock and roll band. I don't really like to be the guy in the white suit at the front. Like in the Beatles, I was the one who kept quiet and at the back and let the other egos be at the front.
When he was a small boy, he told his mother not to talk about him to the other mothers. He didn't want nosy mothers knowing about him. Well, of course, for someone private to become one of the Beatles, I mean, was a fairly heavy psychological disaster.
Philip Norman is the author of Shout, which many consider the definitive Beatles biography.
The Beatles is not a normal story, it's a supernatural story. And the pressure was supernatural, and it required supernatural luck and forbearance to recover from it. And he has recovered from it. He's the one that we're going to have to ask about the Beatles. There's no one else to ask now, because McCartney won't tell you. Ringo can't tell you. John isn't here.
When you say Paul won't tell you, what do you mean?
He rewrites history all the time.
And Ringo can't tell you because...
He doesn't know.
He doesn't know?
No, he just, he drank the drink, he smoked the joints, he had the girls, and he drummed the drums. That was Ringo.
Harrison was barely in his 20s when the world embraced the Beatles. They were the most envied young men ever, who used their sense of humour to keep the world at arm's length.
Wacky mop tops, cheeky chappies, you know, just sort of, oh, hello then, how you doing? You know, like all the cartoon Beatles things, with the little jokes and stuff.
Okay, what's your favorite song?
White Christmas.
Did you say White Christmas?
Yeah.
It's a good song.
Not in rock and roll.
Christmas.
Oh, yeah, it is, yeah. Yeah, it is. You've heard it.
Very naive, very sincere.
Very charming.
Charming, yeah, but a bit thick.
I hope to have enough money to go into a business of my own by the time we do flop. I've always fancied having a ladies' hairdresser salon, you know, a string with them, in fact.
I remember seeing a clip of you saying, well, when this all flops,
Oh yeah, we'll
I'm
all
going to
have
be business.
hairdressers and
Yes.
stuff, yeah.
Yes.
But that's fun, we said that. You know, we were naive in those days. You see, a big change happened in 1966, particularly to John and myself, because a dentist we were having dinner with put this LSD in our coffee. Now, people who've taken that will know what I'm talking about, and anybody who hasn't taken it won't have a clue, because it transforms you. After that, I didn't need it ever again. That's the thing about LSD, you don't need it twice.
You've only taken it once?
Oh no, I took it lots of times. But I only needed it once.
Turn off your mind, relax and float downstream.
Harrison was the one for whom the Indian mystical period and the mind-expanding psychedelic period gave a measure of power. As soon as Harrison took the sitar into the studio, he became important, because up to that point, George Martin, the producer of the Beatles, was terrible to him. He used to say, you will play these notes. Here they are on the piano. You will play this. He was the underdog of the Beatles. He was the one who had the most miserable time. Harrison was very much younger, in particular, than Lennon, and Lennon used to patronize him and call him that kid. That stuck for an awful long time. That's another root of this sort of resentment and this feeling of discomfort and rancor that he had as a Beatle.